Recording here. Okay, we're good to go. All right. Thank you all for being a part of this and taking time out of your Friday night to be a part of this event, this little mini workshop that I put together. I know a lot of us have always had questions in regards to parenting, um, and just if we're doing the right or wrong thing. And then I know a lot of us, we have kind of a spiritual background and just trying to raise conscious children, making sure that they're getting everything that they need, that they're able to live an empowered in a life where they're prepared to take on this world. So this is going to be this presentation is going to really kind of go into the aspects of and how I call it power parenting. Because the way I believe it is, it's just really power parenting. These are parents who are walking within their power, who are also creating children to walk in their power as well. So we're going to call it power parenting, but just to kind of give you all a brief roadmap, what to expect. It's going to be broken down into two sections. The first one's going to be more of the parent-child relationship, and then the second part is going to be um, more with the message, more specifically a message to the parents. So, without further ado, again, I appreciate you all so much for being here. I've been really excited, been working on this for a little while now, and to finally get this going. So, let's begin. So, what is power parenting? Power parenting is the act of intentionally setting aside one's own ego and desires in order to allow children to establish and develop their own language or form of communication, as well as develop and create an empowered child that is authentic, genuine, and put into a position to seed and thrive in life. So, in other words, conscious parenting or power parenting, however you want to say it, it's essentially you not allowing your triggers when it's safe and it, something happens as far as the child does something that we disagree with or we dislike. Let's say they knock something over. We have a natural inclination to respond in a way of we either yell or we either get upset real quick. And in this power parenting model, what we're looking to do is to check our own responses and how we react and how we approach the situation. Why? Because we realized that, hey, it was one point that we were a child ourselves. We realized children are going children, and depending on their age and their development already, it's going to differ. So, what am I talking about? Well, you cannot expect a 3 year old to be acting like an 8 or a 9 year old. It's just not going to happen. It's a 3 year old being a 3 year old. They make mistakes, they get into things. So, when these things come up, seeing well, how do I handle the problem or handle the scenario, what's going on at hand? And this is essentially what power parenting is removing ourselves and our expectations of how we want things to take place, and really seeing what took place here. What was the child's intent? Did they really mean to do this? And as we go more throughout the presentation, we will give more examples and models that we can look to learn, to see different methods that we can take. But some of the key points here is realizing children are their own unique and individual self that are seeking the best way that they know how to express themselves. Now, the question I'll also ask here is how do they look to learn how to express themselves? Well, that leads us to the next bulletin point here. Children are a reflection of their environment. So, what does that mean? They're looking up to us to see, well, how do I respond to this situation? How do I react? What am I supposed to do? Power parenting is a two-way street between the parent and the child, as understanding the child's emotional needs, as to see what happened before that situation took place, to understand their intent behind it. But then, too, when we bring ourselves into the picture, us not reacting, us not reacting in a negative way, a way that increases how bad the child feels about whatever just took place. Because let's just be real here, if a child knocks a glass down and they accidentally make a spill, they're already feeling bad about the situation. But us as parents not adding on to that, but helping them understand, not only understand the emotion but a correct way how to express it. If we see a child knock a glass over and break something and we instantly yell and instantly start, cussing out the child, that's reacting to a trigger that something within us is showing that, hey, we still need work onto it. So, as I said earlier, this is going to be kind of twofold. This is going to be directed to the children, but more importantly, power parenting is really directed to the focus on the parents and how we respond and react in these situations when our children are doing things that, we're just not happy about. It makes us upset. And then the second part is, like I said, as we get more into it, being able to set proper boundaries, setting the rules, and being able to hold boundaries. This will be twofold because not only are we teaching boundary setting, which is going to be a good skill for the children to have themselves, but they'll be able to set good, proper boundaries and hold those. And again, too, when it comes to helping them with their emotions, this is going to be directly tied back to emotional intelligence because we're helping the child to walk through the emotion to understand it that way that they can use their emotions to empower them instead of them working against them. So let's keep moving forward. Why is power parenting important? So, power parenting develops beneficial behaviors such as an increased patience, discipline, boundary setting, advanced communication skills, and much more due to the creative environment set by the parent. Parent parenting establishes and creates an environment that allows both child and parent to develop a more balanced and harmonious relationship. Remember, like we said, it's a two-way street when it comes to communication between the child and the parent. Not just the child is, or excuse me, not just the parent is always going to be correct and always right. It requires both parties showing patience and being able to understand one another. So, power parenting gives children the greatest opportunity to also become powerful adults that are they're able to create and manifest the world that they so desire. And we'll go more into that. Who should look to engage in power parenting? Well, that's any parent seeking to end generational curses or negative patterns that have passed from generation to generation. We'll talk on that. Parents seeking to create a generation of wise, conscious, and empowered individuals, and parents seeking to establish a positive foundation and set of principles that will last a lifetime. And then parents also willing to heal and shed layers of their own false programming and or conditioning and to be their true and most authentic expression of self in order to set the example for the child to imitate, reflect, and live by. So, how are we going to start this? So, as I kind of said a little bit earlier, the first part of this is going to be more of a parent guide. It's going to really speak more about the parent-child relationship. We're to go more into the development of the child, specifically from the very first years of this child's life and how influential we are as parents to the children. We're going to talk about the psychological, the biological, the psychological, biological effects that will take place from our parenting. And then the second part, we're going to go more into, like I said, this is going to be directly related to the parents themselves. So, like I said, if anybody does have any questions, we're going to have a section where we kind of take a pause before we go to the next part. So if you do have a question, make sure to write it down just in case I happen to miss or, well, yeah, write your question down. And then when we get to the time to answer or ask questions, that way you'll remember it and we can get that question going there. So without further ado, let's get started. So, like I said, this section is going to go over the development of an individual, factors that have a tremendous impact on the psychological and biological development of an individual, as well as provide different methods of approach one can utilize. And then, too, as well, you all will also be getting a workbook over this entire presentation that's also going to provide you with more methods of approach as well. But yeah, let's get into it. So, key elements to power parenting. And I'm going to take my time going through this. So if you want to write this down, feel free, go ahead. But again, as I've already kind of stated, parenting is a relationship and not a one-way transmission process. Children are their own unique people who can teach a parent. Just like how we were all children at one point. And we felt a certain way about our parents when they would do certain things that we may have not necessarily agreed with. I know there's plenty of times that I can reflect within my own childhood that I even told myself, hey, if I have children, I'm going to do this differently. I don't like the way that my parent went about doing that. For me, I was a child that felt like I was highly misunderstood. And a little bit definitely did happen to, I grew up with my mom and my stepdad, and I was highly like very, very similar with my biological father. So there was a little bit of a disconnect in the way I would act and carry myself and my personality. And this sometimes caused tension between my stepfather and I. And there were times where him and I would get into it, and I felt like I wasn't being understood. I felt like everything I was trying to tell him, he could see it from my perspective. And it really kind of um hurt our communication, especially with one another. Even to this day, it still seems to be this awkward, type of feel, even though he's been somebody who's been in my life since I was 4, pretty much has raised me and everything. It's still, when we get together, there still seems to be some type of awkward feeling, and really not, necessarily on my end, because, I've definitely let some things go and done my, healing on my part of it. But there's still some things with us, my upbringing, that, he wasn't comfortable with. But where I'm going with this is back to saying it is a two-way street. We have to understand that just how we're unique individuals and we have our own likes and dislikes, and we have certain things that we're not fond of, our children do just as well. Even though they may have not been on this planet as long as us and they have not had as much worldly experience as we have, that does not throw out their feelings, that does not invalidate their feelings and how they see things and how they're perceiving things. And then two, again, depending on what age they are, we again, as I've always kind of stated, you have to ask yourself when a child does something, what is the intent behind this? Did this child intentionally mean to annoy you and make you upset? And now, since you're upset, that you want the child to stop, or was the child just being what, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, just being a child and doing what children do? So that's a really big point. Parenting is a relationship, and just like with any relationship you have with a spouse, there has to be communication. If there's no communication, then we know how that is. People can be feeling some type of way, something's bothering you, but you never know, because we're never seeking out to have that communication. And here's another point. Here's another part, since we're still on communication. Depending on the age of your child, the communication is going to be different. I can't talk to a 10 or 11-year-old the same way I talk to a 3-year-old. They're not going to understand. That level of understanding is not the same. So we have to factor that in as well. So moving forward, conscious parenting is about letting go of a parent's ego, desires, and attachments. This is a very key point as well. Our One of the best ways I like to say this is your expectation of how your child is supposed to act and supposed to be. Let that go. Let that child show you how it wants to act and how it's supposed to be. And then you come in and help direct that behavior, direct that energy in a positive way. That's where and we'll talk more into this, but that's the whole aspect of setting up boundaries. And we're going to get more into that. There shouldn't be any confusion by the end of this presentation. But the biggest thing is, hey, if a child is not doing something you expect, think about it. I always keep saying, what's the intent behind the child? Why are they doing what they're doing? Are they doing it because, hey, that's probably what a 3-year-old or a toddler does? And if so, then are they hurting somebody? If they're not, then is this annoying me? 9 out of 10 times, it's probably we're annoyed and we would want the child to stop, and they're not really doing any type of damage or anything like that. But because we want control over the situation, we want the child to stop. And 9 out of 10 times, it may be something that we're in the middle of doing something, we're distracted, and we keep hearing that, so it's bothering us. But again, going back to it, if I'm being honest, children are going to be here. Like I said, they're going to teach us. They're going to reveal things, interpersonal things that we have within ourselves that we still need to work on. So again, removing ourselves off the way and really asking ourselves, well, wait a minute, is this really a problem, or is it I have a problem of how it's going? And again, that may be showing some type of control area that we're still needing to work on, because we didn't have control growing up, and our parents told us, no, you can't do this, and you got to do this, and it got to be this way. Again, we are a reflection of our environment, just like our children are going to be. So it's important for us to check it with us first before we end up passing that down or projecting that to our child. So moving forward, instead, and this ties with the next point, instead of forcing behaviors on children, parents should focus on their own language and their own expectation and their set for regulation. Again, this is very important, especially if you have a toddler. We have to realize that the younger the age is, the attention span is not going to be there all the way. There's times with my 3-year-old that I have to really be patient. I have to turn the TV off. I have to cut it off or pause it because his mind's being pulled in so many different areas. And, even the cat can run by and it'll distract him. And I have to realize that, hey, he's just 3 years old. He's trying his best. And truth be told, he really is a good 3-year-old. He really does do a good job at listening, but it's taking time up. I will have to take the time out, breathe, reflect to see what happened, and then explain this as best as I can, possibly to a 3-year-old to help him understand, hey, this is how daddy felt about it. This is not okay. And really break this down and make sure that he's understanding. But again, I also realize it's a 3-year-old. I could only ask and expect so much. Sometimes we're expecting our children to be adults. And again, they're children. They're going to do what children do. Now, that does not mean let a child do with anything and everything and, not have any guidance. But what I'm getting here and what we're going to talk more in is children are truly a reflection of their environment. And I'm pretty sure you all have heard the saying that we are a product of our environment, but we're going to go more into the science behind that and really, drive home that point. So moving forward, instead of reacting to issues with consequences, parents should establish boundaries ahead of time and use positive reinforcement. We obviously know that our children, especially if they're, 11, 12, preteen, teens, they have phones, they have tablets, they have all these devices, all these things that they like to do, whether it's hanging out with their friends or whatever it may be. We can start utilizing these as bargaining chips. Hey, if you want to do this, I need you to get this done. Hey, if you don't get your homework or if you go to bed or stay up late past a certain time, something's going to way. We have to meet them at their level to see what is it that they value. Because just how you're a person, an individual, you like the things that you have and that you do, and you don't want those things to be taken away, neither does a child. And I get sometimes that when you implement this new parenting style, I will first say it's not always going to work right off the bat. Why? Because what you're accustomed to, what you might have been raised and brought up was, hey, I tell you to get off that TV. If that TV is going on past a certain time, I'm gonna come in here and beat you. That's what some of us can relate to because that's how some of our parents brought us up ourselves. Now, I'm not saying it was that extreme. Obviously, it's going to vary between household to household, but a lot of us are accustomed to, hey, if you don't do it this way, you're going to get your ass beat or you're going to get hit. And again, we'll go more into that, but if we're going to call a spade, that's trauma. I don't care how you want to put it, how you want to say it. Trauma is any situation that you're involved in that was completely overwhelming, that you had no control over, that left some type of psychological injury or pain. A child being whooped, a child has no control over that. You are the one controlling that. So yes, you are putting trauma onto your child. Now, that being said, there's a time and a place when you've exhausted all other options where the last thing may be, we got to give a little tapping. But again, a lot of this is going to be about balance. And then two, as we go more into this, once we set and establish boundaries and the children start to understand these boundaries, they will begin to respect them. And the reason why I know this to be true, because if I can get a 3-year-old to do it, I guarantee you can get your children to do it. But it takes time, it takes patience, it takes being very understanding. And then two, it takes letting go of a lot of our preconceived behaviors of what it means to be a parent. Because just how many of you all have been first-time parents, already have children, the first time doing it, you didn't know what you was doing. You had to learn trial and error to see what worked and what didn't work. There was times, even now, and look, I'm not going to act like I'm a parenting guru because I'm not. I only have a child and he's only 3 at that. However, we all have a childhood ourselves and we all understood how it meant to feel like we weren't being understood or feel like, hey, this wasn't my intent behind it, but I still got in trouble for it. We're trying to stop these same feelings and these same patterns from going to the next generation, because for the ones of us who have experienced the whoopings and everything, we may say, we're fine and everything, but I can guarantee you, if I have a conversation with you, I could pick out somewhere where the addiction started, whether that may be food, whether that may be you turned to weed, whether that may you turned into sex, whatever it may be. If you're still having issues with yourself or issues where you feel like you're not getting ahead, trust me, these are the effects of having a traumatic childhood. And again, sometimes they can vary in degree, but a lot of us still have it. So again, we're looking to remove our previous beliefs and our previous what we conceive of what parenting is, and to put it in more to a balanced way between us as the parent and the child. So let's keep moving on. Instead of trying to fix a momentary problem, and this is a big one for parents, but instead of us trying to fix a momentary problem, example, a temper tantrum, it's important to look at the process. What led up to this event and what does it mean in the bigger picture? So let's just give an example here. Let's just say you are on your phone and your little one is trying to get your attention. And let's just say that they're playing with their toys and they're like, "Mom" or "Dad," and they keep saying it and keep saying it. You're like, "Hold on, give me 1 second. Let me finish this text." "Well, give me 1 second. I'm in the middle of this." And they keep calling on us. And we start to feel a little agitated because it's like they're poking at us. And it's like, "Hey, I'm in the middle of something. I'm doing something." And then the child is trying to trying to build their train set or whatever it is that they're trying to do. And they keep asking us, and then they start getting frustrated because they're not, what they're trying to do is not working, and they've asked us and they're not getting the attention from us that they're looking for. So now they're getting more frustrated, and now to the point where they're only what, 3, 4, 5, or 6, not really knowing how to express and to communicate these feelings of frustration. So they start blowing up and they start crying and they throw something across the room. And then because it's bothering us and we hear it going, out, we know it's happening, we react and say, "Hey, you don't do that," or "I'm gonna get you," or "You don't throw that." But when you looked at the events to see how it built up, the child did reach out. He did ask for help, or she did ask for help. But no, we were in the middle of on our phone or some device or middle of doing something. Again, this comes back to understanding how that event took place, how it unfolded, and helping the child to understand their own anger and their own emotions and their own frustrations. And then two, this is why I say this applies to us as a parents. How many times have you let one moment out of your day ruin your entire rest of your day? Because one bad thing happened, you had a big fit, you had got in some type of mood. Well, because such and such cut me off, now the rest of my day is going wrong. Again, a lot of this stuff deals from childhood and how we would handle these situations. And some of us to this day, still things that we need to work on. But this is the whole aspect of power parenting. As we work on ourselves, we help heal the areas that we need healing in, help get over our own insecurities, our own weaknesses that we may not share with everybody. It allows us to be a more empowered parent because we can recognize this within ourselves, but also help guide and lead our children and help them recognize it within themselves as well, especially when it comes to emotional intelligence and understanding their emotions and understanding why they feel the way they do. Again, it's a two-way. It takes both of us. It takes two to tango, both the child and the parent. So moving forward, parenting is not just about making a child happy. Children can grow and develop through struggles. Now, let me pause here real quick because I do not believe to an extent of you intentionally put your child through a negative situation to get a lesson, to understand a lesson. Now, there are times where the child is going to have to learn on their own, and you're going to have to take a little step back to allow them to have and develop that understanding. But I'm not telling you to intentionally make your child struggle. You have to have some discernment and pick and choose those. "Okay, no, you need to do this because I know you're smart enough. I know you can handle it. I'm not going to do this for you." That is what I'm talking about. Not, "Oh, I'm going to make my child's life so hard because I had the struggle." No, 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 no. We're stopping that. That doesn't happen anymore. However, we are creating self-sufficient and self-sustaining children, and they're going to have to learn how to handle and deal with a little pressure because, as we all know, because we've been living here, this life is going to throw pressure. It's going to throw challenges. But the better they are equipped to handle these challenges and approaching it from, "Hey, this is just a challenge that's going to make me stronger." Why? Because mom and dad made sure I had this understanding growing up. That's what's going to help them in the long run. And for the ones who take my class, you already know this. I already say the mind is all and the universe is mental. What we're looking to do is strengthen their mind, strengthen their emotional intelligence, strengthen their patience, strengthen their discipline. And this all comes from power parenting. So let's see here. And then another big thing about power parenting is, and this is probably going to be one of the biggest ones too, is acceptance. Acceptance requires being present and engaging with whatever the situation presents themselves. So again, if the child's not meeting your expectation as how you expect for this child to be behaving, instead of attaching to that expectation, attach yourself to what's actually happening in that now moment. Accept what is. You can't change it. You can't fix it, but we can, coming into the future, look to approach it a different way. So, and we're gonna go more into that because I don't want to leave that point. I definitely go more in depth into that, and we are as we progress. But let's keep going here. So, a guide to parenting. Um, First off, give yourself a break. Parenting for all of us at some point was new, and you all realize this. There's no perfect parenting approach to anything. Again, just how we're all unique and creative, expressive individuals, just as our children are. And every method and every approach is not going to work. That's why it's so important for us to, as parents, to do our own healing and to understand our own things. So when our child is going through it itself, so we can help them find it within themselves. We can help them, you know, understand their emotions, understand what they're feeling. And that because we know how to do it within ourselves. But again, there's no, one way, what one size fits all when it comes to parenting. I'm not going to act like there is. I'm not going to tell you that. But there is another alternative that can probably provide you with the results that you're looking for if you're willing to give the time, the patience, and the discipline to do it. Again, as we said, most of you can attest that this is an ongoing learning journey. And with each child, that journey is a little different. I know that to be definitely true for myself. And more, I'm really more referencing back to my parents. They had 4 children. I was the oldest. And to this day, I promise you, I'll come home. I'll be like, there is no way I would have let me get away with this. They entirely did everything different. I mean, from when I was little, there were some things I couldn't say. I get my mouth popped. I was the oldest. So I guess you could say I was the guinea pig. But even as they had more children and they understand that the children had different personalities and how they communicated, different love languages and all these different things, they realized, hey, what we did with Chris, and we've had these conversations. So this is how I know this, but they said we had to change some things up because we didn't, like how things kind of turned out with our relationship. And there's more to our story. I'm not going to get into that today. If you want to hear that, you can, have a call with me outside of this. But the point of where I'm getting at is even as we have more children, for some of you who already have multiple ones, it's a little bit different. With that first one, it's different than to the second or third. We may not be as cautious as, we were with the first one in comparison to the other two. It changes and it's evolving, but that's okay. That's what we have to understand. These relationships are going to be changing and evolving, and we have to understand to establish that communication between both the child and the parent so we can fit these needs and these requirements and be able to answer their emotional needs at the same time while you as the parent are still staying sane and you're happy. So we said each of our journeys is a little different. Why is that? Let's get into the good stuff. So the first thing, and I think some of you all can kind of get to the theme of this, a lot of this is really, you can bring yourself into the mirror. You can bring yourself into the picture. So we say, look in the mirror. Just like I said earlier, you are your own unique and expressive individual. You have certain things you like and dislike, and you prefer certain forms of communication over others. An example of that, some of you may prefer to send a detailed text voicing your internal feelings, while others may prefer to speak over the phone, or some of you may perhaps speak face to face. However, we all have different ways of how we like to communicate and how we like to express what we're feeling inside. So, as it says, we all have unique and creative personalities. And yes, parts of these personalities form and develop as we live and have life experiences. We all can attest to this. As parents, we have twice the work to do because, let's just be real here, some of us are still trying to find ourselves. Some of us are still healing from things in the past, things that we haven't really, gotten that understanding and being able to move from. At the same time, still trying to help our little ones grow, develop, and when it gets to that time, help them find who they are, how to be their most genuine and authentic expression. So, as we said, parents have twice the work to do. We have to try to help our little ones navigate and find themselves the best way they can in the most healthy and genuine and authentic way. So, look in the mirror. Ask yourself, what's your love language? How do you like to receive love? I know some people say, well, love language is about you and your spouse. No, love language is about relationships. because we have our own inclinations or ways of how we like things being done. Why do you think you're different from your child? Your child has it, even though they may be younger, and and obviously the age range is going to make a difference here. But we all know our children. We can, even when they're little, we start seeing their personality start to come through and start to blossom. Well, just like that, they have their own unique personality. They're all going to have their own unique love language. How do you like to receive love? Is it words of affirmation? Do you like gifts? Do you like acts of service, quality time? My little one, his love language is quality time. He loves being around us, up underneath us. Granted, yes, he's an only child, but he does not like, he dreads time out because he wants to know what's going on. He wants to be around everybody. He loves it when you have that one-on-one time with him where you're playing with his trains and it's just about him and that time's not being interrupted or distracted. That's his big thing. And, no coincidence, because that's how my wife is. Her love language is quality time. So I'm a Cancer and everything. And, if you're any water signs, we need our space every now and then. And sometimes I'm within that as well. And I need my own space. And there'll be times where my wife will be like, hey, what you doing? Well, I'm needing my own space and everything. But I get that because that's her love, or one of, the biggest love language is quality time. So she won't be around me. And I get that. And that is, and me being the Cancer that I am, I'm like, okay, you had enough of your own personal time. You're good. Go interact with people and everything. But again, just how we have that with our own spouse, and how if we want to have a good harmonious relationship, we understand that there's going to be communication. We understand that there's going to have to be sacrifices on both sides. It's the same thing with our children. They are not what's the word, exempt from it. So another thing I do also want you to ask yourself while we're on here, and just think, were there ever moments as a child that you wish your parents would have done something differently? Primarily communication, primarily trying to hear you out. Was there ever a time in your upbringing where you felt like, yo, I didn't do anything wrong and I got in trouble for it? Because whatever might have taken place, there might have been a miscommunication of information or whatever. Maybe something happened at the school and it was the teacher's word against your word, whatever it may be. But realizing just how you had a certain way, how you felt as a child, our children are also going to feel that way as well. So we'll look more into this as far as the love language. I know it says spouse, but again, this is just relationship. Words of affirmation. Do you have a child that likes to be uplifted, that likes to hear positive things? You know, is that your type of child? Is your child somebody who likes to be up underneath you, always constantly giving you hugs and everything, loves that physical touch? These are things that you can start noticing about your child if you take a chance to step back and just observe it. Again, do you have a child that likes to receive little gifts or like you doing little nice things for them? My little sister is so much like this, and she's only 11 years old. Any little thing, it doesn't matter what it is. If you thought about her and you got her little gift, oh my goodness, that little girl goes crazy over it. But that's her love language. That's one of the ways that she receives and communicates and expresses love is through gifts. But again, like we said, we have to be able to honestly, as a parent, get out of the dominant role and almost take a submissive approach to see, okay, well, how does this individual like this? Or how does my child like, or how do they like to communicate love? Or how do they like to receive love? What is it that they like to do? Just how you would make your spouse and you do things because you want to make them happy. It's same thing with your children. Now, again, that goes back to balance. Obviously we want to make their life enjoyable and happy, but again, going back to, there are some things that they have to learn, some lessons that does have to take place. But again, how can we make this as good for them to make sure that they're having a good, happy, joyful, and an empowered type of life? Well, how we communicate love is going to be really important to them, and it's really important to understand their love language. So let's move on. Another big thing, personality types. So the way I broke this down is based off of the 4 temperaments, and we're going to go over this. But again, this is a big thing because just like how I said earlier, we all have our unique individual personalities. Guess what? Your children do as well. So let's get into this. People with a sanguine personality type tend to be lively, optimistic, buoyant, and carefree. They love adventure, and hybrids in having high risk or have a high risk tolerance. Sanguine people are typically poor at tolerating boredom, and they will seek a variety in entertainment. Naturally, this trait can sometimes negatively affect their romantic and other relationships. Because the temperament is prone to pleasure seeking behaviors, many people with the sanguine personality are likely to struggle with addictions. Their constant cravings can lead to overeating and weight problems. Now, again, that's not everybody, but again, we recognize this within our children. They have this personality type. Then how can we cater to this? How can we have them to express this in a positive way so they don't get, go into so they don't have a hard time with potentially struggle with things of addiction? How can we teach and instill balance, because we know that they can be, that's because they have this personality, they're more prone to these type of pleasure seeking behaviors. Again, this is why it's important to know our child. Just how the saying goes, know thyself, know your child. So, sanguine people are very creative and become great artists. Moving forward, phlegmatic personality. Phlegmatic personality is usually a people person. They seek interpersonal harmony and close relationships. So, they may be an individual who like to have those attention times, to have that quality time with an individual. This may be your child. You know, this, as it says, this makes phlegmatic people loyal spouses and loving parents. I'm definitely the phlegmatic type of personality, more of a phlegmatic choleric. I think that's how, if I'm saying that right, but we'll go more into that. But they make it a point to preserve their relationship with old friends, distant family members, and neighbors. People with this phlegmatic temperaments tend to avoid conflict and always try to mediate between others to restore peace and harmony. They are very much into charity and helping others. Choleric, and I'm probably not saying that right, but someone with a pure choleric temperament is usually a goal oriented person. Choleric people are very savvy, analytical, and logical, extremely practical and straightforward, and they aren't necessarily good companions or particularly friendly. They dislike small talks and enjoy deep and meaningful conversations. They would rather be alone than in the company of shallow, superficial people. Ideally, they want to spend time with people who have similar professional interests. So the last one, melancholy. People with a melancholic personalities love tradition. Women cook for men, men open doors for women. They love their families and friends, and unlike sanguine people, they do not look for novelty and adventure. Even more so, they avoid it as much as they can. Someone with a melancholic temperament is unlikely to marry a foreigner or leave their homeland for another country because they seek what's traditional, they seek what's comfortable, they seek what they've always known. Melancholic people are very social and seek to contribute to the community, being extremely thorough and accurate, and they are fantastic managers with good personality. So the purpose of this is to try to give you all a little bit of an insight into the different type of personality types, and then to see, well, hey, do you see some of this within your own children? Do they, express themselves in these ways? And if then so, then we can look to see, well, what's going to be beneficial for them? What can we do to help them express their personality type in a proper way? So the reason why I say this is, with every personality type, especially these four here, there's going to be parts of where they have strengths in, and there's going to be parts where they have weaknesses in. And I'll give you all some time to kind of look over this, because you probably thought, well, oh, this is my personality type, and oh, this is something that I'm good at, and this is something I struggle with. And again, you all will have all access to these slides and everything, so you can go back to refer to this. But again, these weaknesses are going to be areas of where we know we can help them work in. For me, I have that phlegmatic, that choleric phlegmatic type of personality. One of my weaknesses, and I can definitely agree to this, is, there have times when as a child I was definitely shy. I didn't like things, I didn't like things to change. I like things to have a routine, be how it is. That same, like I said, I like the routine. It makes me feel comfortable that I know what's going to happen, what to expect. Prone to laziness. This is a huge one, and something I've had to work on myself, is not being as lazy. But again, when we understand these personality types, we can now see and know what to work on when it comes to our children. And then, like I said too earlier, all this is twofold. This is not just about the children. This also goes back to us as well. So moving forward, and this is probably what you all are familiar with, of seeing it broken down in like the Myers-Briggs personality types. This is using the same four temperaments but converting it over into that. But again, you're all gonna have access to this slide, so you can go back and look at this. So let's take a second to regroup here. So one of the things we talked about is how we have our own different forms of communication and love language, and we different and unique personalities, as do our little ones. One of the biggest things that's going to help with this type of parenting style is realizing your child is its own unique individual. And just like you wanted somebody to be patient and understanding with you, being able to do that same thing for them, being able to create a space where they do feel comfortable to come and open up and talk to you. Why? Because you've made it possible by letting them and having these conversations to say, hey, it's all right. What's going on? What's bothering you? How you feeling? What's that emotion? What's on your mind? What's got you down? The more that we implement this, the more that, again, especially for the ones who are in my class, the subconscious mind learns through repetition, symbols, and trauma. Well, let's use repetitions here. The more that we repeatedly take that time to be patient, to truly understand what our children were wanting, what they were needing, they're going to be able to be more comfortable with actually opening up and expressing themselves and letting us know. But if they always feel like every time I come to mom or dad and I have something to say, well, either they get mad at me or they tell me to go away or in the middle of doing something, or they're always busy. Look, some of these things we can attest to this because it's something that we experienced ourselves as children. Really, what is going to help this is you thinking about your own upbringing, what you would have done differently, things that you dislike, things that you wish your parents would have done for you, but they didn't. Again, like I said, children are going to bring about and reveal things that we still have to work on within ourselves. That's why we're triggered. That's why it's bothering us, because we still haven't gotten over this yet. Whether that may be control, whether that may be patience, whether that may be love. I'm going to be honest. Because if you didn't come from an upbringing or a household where you received that love, or love wasn't really given to you, or you felt like you had to fight for it, trust and believe there's going to be some type of love or expressing that when it comes to you and your own child. But again, this is why it's so important to heal it within ourselves first, so we don't go passing those same things that we struggled with onto our own children. So again, as I've already kind of touched, it's up to us to remove ourselves out the way so we can observe and figure out and determine theirs or what they're needing to work on in order to help and discover and find it within themselves. And then here's another thing. If all or something that can give us more insight into ourselves or into others, anybody, and if you have it, I highly recommend, but go look up your natal chart. We can do this with our children as well. And what I'll say here, for the ones who have looked up your natal chart, you know how spot on that thing is. You know how crazy it is. Even when you talk about the Mercury, where Mercury, whatever sign that's in, where your Mercury's in Cancer or Gemini, Mercury has everything to do with how we think, how we communicate, how we express ourselves. What if you had a blueprint that showed you how your child's going to express itself, how it likes to communicate, how it likes to receive love? Well, guess what? You do. You have the natal chart. Our natal chart is such a good tool that gives us such an insight into ourselves. And if this is something that you have not done yet and you're not familiar with this, look, outside of this, let's schedule a time. I'll take you and walk you through it. But again, these are tools that we can use. They're going to give us an insight not only into ourselves, but into our children. And then here's another thing, because what I did with my own natal chart was I went through there and I looked at all the areas of where they said I would struggle and I needed to work on it. And I'll admit, a lot of it is definitely true, that even to this day that I can test to say, hey, I'm a person that I like to put things off. Sometimes I have to work on me not procrastinating and not waiting till the last minute to do and complete things. And it definitely says all that within my natal chart. So what is it? Something that I do? Well, the moment I get something that needs to get taken care of and be done, boom, don't put it off, get it done. So I don't create that habit that honestly has already kind of been created. I work to rewire, to redo that habit, to get things done when they come up and not put them off. Well, imagine if you knew that before your child even got to that point and you already went to start implementing good habits. You can. Definitely possible. But again, you have personality tests, especially if the child is of age. They don't have to be the one on computers answering the questions. You can ask the questions to the children if they can understand. Now, again, it may be a little different for little ones because They're not all the way, they're still learning. I'm not gonna say they're not all the way there, but they're still learning. They, especially toddlers, we just can't expect them to be able to tell you, oh yeah, I don't, I feel that I get enough love, or I feel like people are communicating, or whatever those personality question, personality tests ask. But again, if it's a child that's 10 or 11 or 12, I mean, I remember my mom giving me a personality test at a young age, and she was able to determine my personality and everything, and that did help to a degree. But moving forward, and there's also zodiac readings. There's so many other tools that I've also put within the workbook that can give you more of an insight into your personality, or excuse me, specifically your children's personality. But again, this is twofold. This applies to us as well. So this is going to be a repeat for you of hot taking the class, but we are going to touch on this again. But child development. There is an incredible period of development that occurs in a child's brain from birth to age 3, including the production of over 1 million neural connections every second. Early childhood, especially between the period of birth term and about 2 years of age, is increasingly recognized as being very important for establishing cognitive absolutes and behaviors that last a lifetime. What I want to touch on here is, again, their very first 7 years are so important because, and as we'll touch on here later on the slides, children's mind are in a certain state, and that state is in the theta state. This state is, there's no filter for them. Everything that they're observing, their environment, they're constantly downloading it and taking in those behaviors, those actions, those thoughts, those ideas. And you ask yourself, where are they getting them from? Their environment. So if that environment's chaotic, dysfunctional, guess what? That's what they're downloading. That's what they're receiving. Again, this comes to you as the parent. You have the ability to an extent to set up the environment of what you want for your child to grow up in. And again, that's why I always, and you're going to keep hearing me saying it's going to get pretty redundant, but we have to work on ourselves first in order to create a stable and a solid foundation in a positive environment. It all starts with us. Brain development after 2 years is characterized by recognition and fine tuning, plasticity, and remodeling of major circuits and networks that are already established. So, in other words, the more often that a child either sees something, an idea, a thought, a behavior, a habit, the more it's expressed, the more the child is going to begin to repeat that behavior, and it's going to become the child's behavior. It's going to be it's going to become a part of their own individual programming. Where are they receiving these programs from? Their environment. What is what is the environment that the child is in? What is that space like? Is that space, is it a good, calm, peaceful space? Are they able to ask you questions? Or is it you're not there? You're not having time for them. They're not being able to be, they're not having their one-on-one time. They're not being able to have access to you. Are you always constantly on the go, constantly at a job? These are all things that we have to ask ourselves. And this is not, and let me first say this, I'm not here to get on to anybody, but these are things that we have to factor in and we think about because it does affect our development. Just how it affected us as children, it's going to affect our children as well. And when we become aware of it and we have the information, now that we have that information, we can use and act on that information in order to not do some of the same things that our parents did to us. And again, it does not make any parent better or worse because, as I've already stated, this was new to a lot of us. But once you have the information, as the saying goes, you know better, you do better. So the rate of growth in the brain remains rapid for the first years after birth, but declines sharply towards the first decade in life. The cycle of growth finally completed in adolescence. So let's touch on this because this is a real big point I want to hammer home here. Excuse me. We said that, and we're going to go more into this in the next slide, but a child's mind from 2 to 6 years of age is primarily functioning in the theta state. And when they're age about from 2 to 6, and really primarily closer towards 6, they're downloading a wide volume of information. Their mind is still within this theta state. And yes, as they get past 6, it starts to go into alpha. But in alpha state, when it comes to them accepting and rejecting things, the degree of that is still not sufficient or proficient like it would be if their mind was in beta state. A child's mind doesn't start going into beta till they get around 10 and 12 years of age. So what am I saying here? Until about 10 and 12, they don't start accepting or rejecting what their conscious mind gives them. Just how when somebody says, "Oh, you ugly and you got a horrible personality," you an adult now. That ain't gonna bother you. Well, I hope it won't bother you. You can reject that. You know it's not true. Or even when it's a friend picking and teasing at you and it's just joking, you're able to say, "Okay, I know it's a joke. I know it's not true." But here's the thing: children's minds are not in that beta state quite yet. And honestly does not get there till, like I said earlier, around 10 and age 12. So they're still in a state where they're constantly receiving. So even if you just, teasing and kind of, teasing your child and picking at him a little bit, because, you're not, you're just playing, you're not meaning anything seriously. You have to understand that there is an opportunity that that child is taking that as, oh, maybe this is not how I should be. This is not okay. I shouldn't act this way. Every time I do this, mom seems to always pick on me or tease me about it. Now, again, I'm not saying that you can't have fun and everything, but I am saying have enough of emotional intelligence to develop within yourself to see, hey, how does this affect my child? Again, what we tell them, some of you may be able to relate to this. If your parent told you you would never amount to anything, you won't, you ain't gonna be anything, you a lazy piece of whatever. If you've heard that and repetitively heard that, especially in these very first decade of your life, you have to understand that that had an effect on your development. That was a program that you downloaded. And even though it is not true, you created and made that to be true. This is why it's so important to us as the parents to how we respond to our children when they do things and when they do mess ups and when they do make mistakes. Because here's the thing, like I said, as being children, as yourself at one point, you know what it's like to mess up. Like when it's you did something that you didn't intentionally mean to do, you already felt bad about it. But then you think about you combine that with trauma and you whoop a child for it. Oh yeah, that's gonna have a lasting effect. And it's not in this presentation, but let's talk about the amygdala and a trauma brain compared to a rational brain. Let me tell you what happens when you put a brain under a lot of trauma. Let me tell you what the amygdala does. It's going to be on high alert. Amygdala is supposed to record and process memory and look at your experiences and learn from them, because that's what it is. A rational brain is constantly learning, constantly growing, constantly evolving, constantly developing, but not a traumatic brain. The amygdala is on high alert. It's like a watchdog. It's looking for triggers. It's looking for things that may come up and hurt you, whether that be mentally, physically, or emotionally. A traumatic brain does not process information the same way. A brain that has undergone a lot of trauma is going to be very trusting, not going to be able to receive information, not going to be able to be trusting in their relationships with. And here's the thing, not just outside of themselves, but they're not going to be able to trust themselves. They're going to have doubt within them because all they've ever experienced, and I don't want to say all that they've ever experienced, but the prolonged and the repeated amount of trauma has affected them when it comes to how they feel about relationships, whether it's their parents, other individuals. Why? Because as we talk about in my class, what's going on is a defense mechanism is coming back up to protect them. It's because of all the times in their past, especially while they were young, children. And let's just remember, childhood is just not from toddler. It's toddler, it's adult, or it's toddler, or it's actually before the prenatal, then the child, a baby, infant, and then the toddler stages. And then we start transitioning more into the, type of preteen, adolescents, and then the teenagers, and then them being, young adolescents, young adults. That's all factored into this. So where I'm going with this is we as parents have huge, a huge influence in our child's psychology, their emotional health, and more important, well, I'm not going to say more importantly, but their physical health as well. And this is why it's so important of the type of environment that we have them in, is that it is a space where they can even be themselves. Because some of us probably can attest to that. I know myself, even though it was my home and that's where I laid my head down at night, I couldn't even be who I truly was because, again, every time I tried to be the goofy, funny, silly kid that I naturally was, Chris, you need to grow up. Chris, you gotta grow up. You gotta be, it's not, you can't be Mr. Funny Man all the time. You think you're just Mr. Funny Guy. Chris, grow up, do this. And here's the thing, my parents is telling me to grow up at 9 and 10. And granted, obviously our situation is a little bit different. But again, when you ask a child to grow up pretty quick, be careful what you ask for. And again, my parents and I have already had this conversation and everything. But what I am saying is these are effects, and everybody, and here's the thing, I'll say this too. It may be a little different comparison to me. I'm not saying that, what happened to me is going to be everybody else, but we know because of science, these are the potentials and the possibilities that can happen. And again, it goes back to the environment that we're creating for our children and also the role that we play within that environment as well. So let's move forward. So, Dr. Rima Labels, I think I'm saying that right, and quantitative EEG and neurofeedback describes the progression of these development stages in brain activity. Between birth and 2 years of age, the human brain predominantly operates at the lowest EEG frequency with zero point 0.5 to 4 cycles per second, or hertz, known as delta waves. Between 2 and 6 years of age, the human brain is at a higher brainwave functioning known as theta. And then and at age 6, we become less susceptible to our outside programming with the increased appearance of a higher frequency called alpha waves. So as I was kind of talking a little bit earlier, yes, as they get a little bit older, they will be able to, because I already kind of have a foundation already set there from the very first 0 to 7, but they still are going to be in that receptive mode. And that means they still are receiving programming and they're still receiving downloads. And these downloads come from the environment that they're placed within. And it's not till the age of 12 the child's EEG spectrum begins to show sustained periods of an even higher frequency defined as beta. What your mind is constantly, what your mind is at as of right now. Your mind is in the beta state. Why? Because you're conscious and you're paying attention. This is focus or active consciousness. So how you're actively and focusing, listening, you're listening to my voice and you're focusing on this presentation, what's going on the screen, you're in beta. You can choose to accept and reject what I say. But here's the thing, you have that ability to do that. But as I said earlier, and as we see, it's not till the age of 12 that a child really starts being able to pick and choose. And by then, we could have already damaged their self-esteem. Well, how does that happen? You're not worthy. You're not good enough. You'll never amount to anything. You're lazy. You can never do good. You're always messing up. You're clumsy. You're always stumbling over something. Why are you always messing something up? Why can you never seem to get this right? By then, the program has already taken place. And then we send them out into the world, ask them to go, be friends and everything. And their self-esteem has already been shot because they got shot at the house. Now they're getting bullied and picked on their children because they can't go express themselves and they can't go create friends because they're nervous and they're shy. Oh, yeah. It all starts at the home. It's our roots. It's our foundation. It's what we build off of. And this is why it's so, so important for us as parents to get out of our own way, to do our own healing. That way we can put our children in the most, pretty much put them in the best position. And how we do that is by making sure that we're doing our own healing as well. So let's keep going through here. So here's a small excerpt from the Biology of Belief. This gives us an important clue as to how children whose brains are mostly operating at this frequency through 6 years of age can download the incredible volume of information they need to thrive in their environment. Young children carefully observe their environment and download worldly wisdom offered by parents or the authority figure directly into their subconscious memory. As a result, their parents' behavior and beliefs become their own. So, what are your beliefs? How do you see yourself? Are there still areas that you still have to work on and that still need healing? Because if there are, there's a potential that we may pass this down to our children unless we decide to start and do it within ourselves first. Again, they can't help this. This is just how you were a child and how you naturally develop. Same thing with them. They are observing their environment and, like I said, downloading that worldly wisdom. And here's the thing: that wisdom may not be. It can be positive or negative. And then two, Who's the authority figure? Who are your children around? You know, one of the things my child or my son, he likes to or go with his cousins. I want to say this is probably about a few weeks ago. He starts saying, what the? And I was like, well, none of us say this in this household. Where did you get that from? Well, he was with other children, and that's what his cousin does a lot. Now, but the point I want to making is he was put into an environment and he picked up on that. And now it's something I can't get him to stop doing. Again, they're downloading and picking up everything within an environment. What type of environment are you creating as the parent? So here's another excerpt. By the time children reach adolescence, their subconscious minds are chock full of the information that ranges from the knowledge of how to walk to the knowledge of they will never amount to anything if that was something that was said repeatedly, or the knowledge fostered by loving parents that they can do anything that they set out to do. The sum of our genetically programmed instinct and beliefs we learn from our parents collectively form the fundamental programs in the subconscious mind. And this is a good book. I'm only pulling out little parts from it, but I highly encourage everybody to get this book, The Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton. But he goes into more into the subconscious mind. And I'm going to tell you this, the subconscious mind is, if I remember right, 100 times more powerful than your conscious mind. So, even though you as an adult may consciously say, I don't want to do this anymore, this behavior or habit is not working with me, you can consciously say that, but you have a mind that is 100 times more powerful that dictates your behavior, your actions, and everything that says, nah, partner, this is a program. This comes first. Your conscious comes next. So what we're looking to do is make sure that we're instilling good programs, good habits at a young age. So when it does become subconscious, we don't have to worry anymore because we know that they can go back and pull from that programming. Again, they're going to reflect what we do, our behaviors. So let's move on, keep going through here. Let's look at the biological effects of parenting. So again, this may be a little bit of a redundant if you are in the class, but these complex small creatures have a pre-birth life in the womb that profoundly influences their long-term health and behavior. Yes, pre-birth in the womb. The quality of life in the womb, our temporary home before we're born, programs our susceptibility to coronary artery disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, and a multitude of other conditions later in life. Look, if you are pregnant, about to have a child, peace, a peaceful environment, an environment where you're not having stress and, having a lot of things going on where you can really focus on carrying that little one and just really focusing on your mental health and making sure that you're good. Because again, that environment is so, so, so important. And again, what I'm really referring to, and this is not everybody, but I've heard many stories. I've talked to many people where they were with a spouse that might have been a little bit abusive, especially while they were pregnant. We have to understand that that's also going to have effect on that child's life. Even though that the child may not actually be actively involved, he's still within that environment. He's still within that energy. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but again, we know science has already proved that it's going to influence long-term health and behaviors. Continue moving on. He also writes and says that there is mounting evidence that programming of lifetime health by the condition in the wombs, by the conditions in the womb is equally, if not important, than our genes in determining how we perform mentally and physically during life. And I know I'm really hitting this point home, but if you're planning to have a little one, if you're already pregnant, it is so, so important that that environment is, like I said, it's peaceful, it's calm. You're having everything that you're needing, that you're not having a lot of stress, because we know this is going to have a long lasting effect on their health, and not just physically, but mentally. So again, let's keep reading this. The responsiveness of individuals to the environmental conditions perceived by their mothers. So if the mother feels like they're in stress and they have to worry and constantly always being anxious, this is going to have an effect. Before birth allows them to optimize their genetic and physiologic development as they adapt to the environmental forecast. The same life-enhancing epigenetic plasticity of human development can go awry and lead to an array of chronic diseases in older age. And if an individual experiences adverse nutritional and environmental circumstances during fetal and neonatal periods of development. Bateson and all and others, 2004. The same epigenetic influences also continue after the child is born because the parents continue to influence their child's development, or environment. But again, the and as you all are probably starting to really realize here, the environment is, if not the biggest thing here. What type of environment are we creating for our little ones? Is it an environment where they feel comfortable, they feel safe, they're able to come and communicate and speak to us? Or is it the opposite of that? Do they feel like they can't approach us? Do they feel like they can't even have a conversation with us? And if that's the case, then we have to ask ourselves, why is that? Because we as the parent, we create the environment, not them. So, what we do as parents has a tremendous effect on our children's life, mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's also important for us as parents to check and identify any unconscious programs that we have unconsciously expressing. That way, we won't unconsciously project this onto our children as it was to us as children. This goes back to breaking generational curses and generational cycles. The same behaviors and ways that our parents might have brought us up that we didn't necessarily agree with. This is where it comes time for us to not repeat and take those same actions and keep pushing it to the next generation. And this is why you're going to hear me say as we transition to the next part that is crucial to be working on ourselves. So, ways to approach power parenting. So we're going to start with an example here. Imagine that your 5-year has been left alone and gotten a hold of the scissors. Of course, every parent's worst nightmare, or one of them. They decide to play barbershop and use their new cutting skills on their hair. And you just walked in and you see the results. So first thing to do here, breathe. Instead of reacting in rage or in horror and cussing the child out and whatever, and then hitting the child's hand or hitting them beside their head or whatever, or like it says, providing immediate punishment or placing blame on the child, as a parent practicing power parenting, you'll take a second to breathe and center yourself and take a moment to move the scissors to a safe location. Remember, we do not want to allow our own triggers to be projected onto our children. Step 2, reflect. It's important time to reflect on any triggers or emotions that we may be experiencing this event that may have stirred inside yourself before expressing them towards your child. Is there something that's bothering you is there something that's bothering you that you're not okay with, that you're going to be projecting to them? Again, as it says, chances are at least a little part of you is thinking about what all of the parents are going on the playground will say. When they see it, and let's just be honest, that's really not a big deal. The child's not hurt, And again, ask yourself, what was their intent behind this? Did they intentionally mean to make mom or dad upset by chopping off a piece of hair? And I'm gonna be honest, this is something that I went through myself. My little one CJ, he ended up getting a hold to the clippers. Mom asleep. And I was on the phone with my mom, so I was not paying attention. Again, this definitely falls on both of us because the clippers were put in a place where he had access to. And yes, he sees me cutting my hair and everything, so he literally imitating the same behavior that I do. He sees me take it out. He sees me plug it up. He sees me cut my hair. He's just doing what he saw daddy do. Now, granted, mom caught him and saw him. She was upset at first, and I was still on the phone with my mom. But by then, it already kind of happened, and I came in. I just kind of laughed it off. It was funny and everything. I was glad he wasn't hurt. We had to have a conversation with him about how he shouldn't get into this. At least not, need to ask for help first or something. And then, but the biggest thing was, well, hey, how did he have access to him? Mom and dad set up the environment. We could have placed it where he couldn't have access to. But again, reflect, make sure that we're not projecting any of our triggers. And if there's something bothering us or something that hasn't even taken place, let that go. Breathe. 3, setting boundaries. This is big, big, big. Power parenting does include setting boundaries, particularly when it comes to requesting respectful communication. So, if your child asked to use the scissors earlier and was told that it would only occur with the parent present for safety reasons, this would be a time to mention the violation of the boundary that has been set. When this boundary has been broken, this is where we can now take some type of toy, some type of playtime, depending on the age of the individual, or if they're a little bit older, they have some privilege removed. They have some that's taken away from them because we don't want them to think that, hey, just because you messed up, there's not going to be any type of consequence. We just don't want that consequence to be a traumatic consequence. So, however, you also need to consider how you can help your child going forward, like moving the sisters to a location that they can't access on their own. Remember, power parenting strives for connection and authentic relationships while focusing on the bigger picture that long term, this isn't about ill cut hair. So, moving forward, the last one here, acceptance. Finally, instead of getting upset with what your child's hair may not look the most professional, power parenting would ask that you accept their hair for where it is now. No need to mourn on the past hairdos. It's already happened. It's already taken place. It's time to practice releasing our ego. You can even use this as an opportunity to work with your child to create a new hairdo. And if they desire one, look, that's some alchemy right there. How can we take something that's perceived to be negative and transmute it and turn it into something positive? Again, you'll know how to do that if you do your own healing, because essentially that's the whole aspect of what the healing journey is. Taking all our negative experiences, our traumatic experiences, and really transmuting that darkness and creating and turning that into light. That's the whole saying of out of darkness comes light. You take your past, you take your traumas, you learn from them, you integrate them, you heal from them. And out of that comes this powerful mother. Oops, excuse me. I'm trying to be professional here. So moving forward, things to remember. Something that you kind of heard me say quite a bit. What was the child's intent? Did they truly mean to annoy you or accidentally damage something or make a mistake? A lot of times, children are merely being children, just like we were at one time. Do a little role playing and see yourself as the child. If you've accidentally knocked over a glass while reaching for a spoon, would you want your parent to spank or yell and fuss at you? No. Why? Because you didn't mean to. It was an accident, and accidents happen. Hell, even some of us as an adults are still making mistakes and having accidents. We don't want somebody, the whole world raining down and coming on to us for our little mistake, especially if we're trying our best, which 9 out of 10 times, children definitely are. Power parenting really seeks to set aside our own ego and focus on our triggers and to look to evaluate why we feel the way that we do. That way we won't project this to our little ones. All right. So before we get into the next part, I just want to know how everybody's doing. Like I said, I'm gonna open this up. If anybody has any questions, let me know. If so, go feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type your questions in the chat. But yeah, I'll go ahead and open it up this time for any questions. And if we don't have anything, then we'll keep on moving on. All righty. Well, speak now, or like I say, forever hold your peace, and we'll get on, keep the train on, moving on. So, message to the parents: we have work to do. We have to admit and realize that as parents, we're not going to always get it right. We have insecurities, flaws, and weaknesses that we still struggle with. And this is a huge part of power parenting is becoming self-aware of our own conditioning in order to not pass it on to our children. A lot of us can relate that there are things we would absolutely do different in comparison to how our parents raised us. Just like our parents probably said the same thing, we ended up passing on the same behaviors and ideas generation to generation. And this is why, as you've heard me state many, many times throughout this presentation, that it's important for us to do our own healing work. It's important for us to start that healing journey for ourselves, because that's going to give us an insight into the things that we still are struggling with, that we're constantly still needing to work on. What does this mean for us as parents? Again, as I've already said, we have to start our own individual healing journey. Why is healing for parents necessary? The healing journey is important because it will give parents insight into their own unconscious programming and conditioning that stem from their own upbringings. We must do our own healing to make sure that we're not projecting our pains and emotional sensitive areas onto our own children. When one takes this healing journey, one is able to seek a more authentic and genuine way of living and expressing their divine self. We know our children are constantly watching and repeating what we do. If we can provide the example of what it's like to walk in our power, then our children would naturally pick up on these tendencies just by being in that sort of environment. So you may be asking yourself, where do I begin? As we stated, majority of our programming that lasts a lifetime can be traced back to our roots. Our roots will factor in our home life, childhood, adolescence, and like I said, your preteens, your teens, and even throughout high school. What we're looking to do is to examine these experiences that took place throughout these different phases of life and to really understand how they impacted us. Again, you who have taken my class already in this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is probably going to be kind of a repeat for you, but especially the ones that were negative and traumatic, these are experiences that we're really looking to bring to the light and to experience, because these things that we say that were negative that we don't really like to talk about, these are the origins or the beginnings to our shadows, these false identities that we have created, and we need it to be able to clearly examine them in order that we're not projecting these false identities onto our children. Questions to ask yourself. Again, people in my class, this is going to be a little bit of a repeat. You already know where I'm going with this. But questions to ask yourself: what was your childhood like? How was your home life? Did you have friends? Were you an introvert? How was middle school? How was high school? How was those experiences? Did you have all the friends? Was everybody your buddy? Or was it not the case? Did you not really have anybody to communicate with? Were you like me? Were you the chameleon who put on different masks? Or in reality, created false identities in order to fit in with groups who really didn't accept me for who I was? How did you feel through these transitions? Did your parents ever argue? What was the environment like in your home life and your upbringing? Were both parents in the household? Understanding, and however, and whatever you answered and came up with, that these situations were out of your control. You were either relying on other individuals, and because of their conditioning and programming, they might have projected that way of being onto you or to you. Any pain, heartache that our parents might have had that was wrongfully directed towards us unconsciously. Again, we don't want to do this, make those same mistakes and do it and project it onto our children. Realize that forgiveness and letting go is absolutely necessary in order to move forward. Not for them, but for us, for your own good. You cannot carry the pain of others with you, and it will only continue to weigh you down. So, just how we know we can sometimes carry the pain of others, do we want to be projecting our pain onto our children so they can carry it for themselves? No. So, this is going to be a very brief intro into shadow work. Again, you all who have taken my class, this is going to be a little bit more of a repeat. For those who haven't, and anybody who's going to be getting the recording, I highly will recommend and encourage, if you are very serious about taking your healing journey and taking it to the next level and really doing this, that you get in contact with me outside of this, and get information more into the class. We go over into shadow work. We go more into, the mind. And again, people in the class can already attest to this. But again, we're going to talk about shadow work, and that's something that we hit hard too within class. But shadow work may also be known as ego. Neither is bad. They just require your balance. These are traits that you have suppressed that may have been positive, but any trait in you is a part of you. The easiest way to simplify shadow work is by simply saying it's the parts of you that you were shamed for. If you came from religious constructs, there are parts of you that you were told to pray away. These were literally pieces that were interwoven into the fabric of your being that are socially unacceptable, that you try to suppress, that you don't want to let them out. Again, we want to be as authentic and ingenuous as possible so we can give our children an example to lead or to follow. And as I was always told, and I believe to this day, the best way to lead is by example. But in order to truly have complete self love, you have to accept and appreciate every piece of you, even the parts of you that you were taught to be ashamed of. Again, you do shadow work so you don't do the same things that our parents might have done to us, parts of them that they might have, or parts that they might have told us to be ashamed of ourselves, that again, naturally who we are. As always, two things I want everybody to remember here is the shame was never yours. The shame was given to you, taught to you, and you were coerced or manipulated into believing it. You will never naturally be ashamed of a piece of yourself. It just won't happen. Your shadows can also vary in degree. Some are worse than others. These are parts of yourself that you have rejected that are you. However, also understand that your shadows can also contain false parts of you. Again, going back to the example I gave to you when with me in high school, I called myself the chameleon. I played basketball and I also did debate, two ends of the same pole. The basketball was with, all the jocks. The debate was with all, kind of the nerdy kids. I am a nerd at heart. I love learning. I love education. I love continue to educate myself. I'm already 4 books deep this within the month of, starting this new year, books completed. Reading is a big thing for me. Like I said, I am a geek. That's okay. That's who I am and I love it. And I love that about me. There are identities that you've created in order to cope with your environment. Due to external influences, you created a false identity to shield you from your own internal feelings. So, this might have been the group that you knew you shouldn't be running with, you shouldn't be around, but you didn't want to feel alone. You didn't want to feel by yourself. So, you start creating this false identity in order to fit in, to be with the group. But again, at the end of the day, it's not truly who you are. You feel like you got to be fake to even be there. This is another aspect of shadow work, is even realizing these identities that we created in the past because of what took place, and to see, hey, are we still giving life to these identities? Are we still giving attention to this? And if so, it's something that we need to bring into the light. We need to understand, why did we do this? Why did we create this in the first place? We need to be able to reconcile that. So your shadows can also be qualities or attributes of yourself that are no longer serving you, but you hold on to it because it's all you've ever known. So, in conclusion, but we are coming up on our hour and a half here, about 7 minutes. Power parenting is a focus on both the parent and the child. We have to let go of the notion because we're the parent, we know best. Children are truly gifts sent to us, and they can reveal and show areas within ourselves that we still need to work on. The child's mind is the divine mind. It is a mind that hasn't undergone years of trauma or programming. The mind is still within its natural state, and as we get older, we begin to lose that inner spark and drive. We begin to focus on the worldly and outer affairs. The reason why I say that is your children can definitely teach you a lot. They can teach you things about yourself. And then, too, especially for us who's on the spiritual journey, ask your children questions. I know it may sound crazy, but if they're still young and they can kind of, they could talk to you 3, 4, 5 around that age, ask them where did they come from before this? Start asking them questions about their lifetime before this. I know it seems crazy, but you will be surprised the type of answers you get. That mind is still in its natural divine state. They still have access to their natural abilities, such as clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairsentience. They still have access to these things, and you do too. They may be, a little late and not developed as much, and you can do that. But your children are in their natural, most divine state because they have not been under all those years of trauma, programming, conditioning quite yet. Again, they can teach you a lot, but you have to be able to remove the belief that us as parents, we know it all and we got all the answers. Because I'll be the first one to tell you, even I'm the one giving this presentation, I still don't have all the answers. This is still an ongoing learning journey that I am constantly learning on. But again, being able to admit that and get the learning and do the work. So, though power through power parenting, this spark can be restored and kindled into a burning passion and desire to become our most authentic and true expression of self, that we may be able to create empowered, conscious adults. So I'm going to go stop sharing my screen here. Alrighty. So I want to say thank you all so much for being a part of this. I know some people who did end up making their deposit and weren't able to be here today, so they're going to do the recording and everything. So for you all who weren't able to make it, again, thank you just for being able to support and be a part of this. Let me know if anybody has any questions. If so, feel free to get in contact with me outside of this. I have majority of everybody's email already. So I'm going to send this presentation that I went over. I'm going to send that to you. Once the recording is finalized and processed, you're also going to get a copy of that. But then too, I'm going to send the workbook to you as well. That's going to have more steps for disciplinary action that you can take within it. It's also going to have resources of how you can get more insight into you yourself and also into your child. But again, for everybody who has not taken my class and not currently in this, again, I highly encourage, if you're going to take this parenting thing very seriously, do your work for yourself. And again, there's a class that can help you with that. People in my class can already attest to that. They've seen it, they know what I'm talking about. But other than that, we've been here almost an hour and a half, like I said we would. I don't want to keep you all here any longer than necessary, unless anybody has any questions. If not, then we'll get out of here.
Thank you for all your knowledge and help.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I will let you all go. Like I said, when everything finalized, I will get this sent over to you, and let me know if anybody has any other questions outside of that. And much love to everybody here. And yeah, you all got this. So keep on going, keep on growing, and keep on healing. Peace.